Steelers owner Art Rooney addressed the media on Monday. We'll talk about what he said about the Steelers' playoff drought and how quarterback is tied to all of it and what that means about their plan moving forward. All that here more on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 off in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Steelers fans, let's get into it because Art Rooney addressed the media Monday from the Steelers facility in a big meeting and basically kind of aired out some things, saying that the team is impatient. They want to find ways. They want to find ways to win in the playoffs, and getting a little impatient was the thing that was the exact quote that they went into. But the thing that seemed to be the leading factor was about fixing the quarterback situation, and that seems to be the priority for the Steelers moving forward. This is what Art Rooney said. He said, "quote I think the biggest thing that we need is quality play at the quarterback position." Going on, he's talked about Kenny Pickett. He said the things about Kenny that we always liked were his toughness, his competitiveness, and his desire to be a winner. He has all those sorts of intangibles. What I think we need him to be is really just continue to develop to be a quarterback that can read a defense quickly, get the offense into the best play for a given situation when he comes out of the huddle. He's learned and gotten some experience at that, and he'll continue to work on it. So let's take that into consideration for a little bit here, because Art Rooney is saying, hey, we want to win, but we know we got to get better at the quarterback position. And this is something that I've been saying. If the Steelers could just get solid quarterback play consistently, they're a problem, because the way they're building around the quarterback position, the way they're building the offensive line, the weapons they're putting on offense, the defense that they're keeping talented. If they can one also get a little bit easier with the injury situation in the future years, but also two, if they could get consistent quarterback play that just, again, not anything elite, but kind of along the lines of what Mason Rudolph is giving you for a few games. Maybe a little bit better than that, because you want it to like step up to the level of a sufficient starter in the NFL. But if you could get that, this team becomes a serious problem, and they don't lose nearly as many games. And that's where I think Art Rooney's point is, that they want to get there. Now, the fact that Art Rooney's addressing him about Kenny Pickett, and we'll get into Mason Rudolph in a bit, because there was a question that you guys called in with, and I'll address that question when we get there. But the fact that Art Rooney's talking about what they believe in Kenny, and how they believe in Kenny, and why they believe in Kenny, that shows to me that they're still going to try to make this work with him next year. Now, I've said this before. Next year is the last year for Kenny Pickett. Like, they're going to try to keep Mason. We'll get into Mason. Even if they can't keep Mason, they're going to bring in someone else that's going to be able to challenge him, maybe someone else's to challenge him. But Kenny Pickett has to prove it. And I think that part of what Art's getting at here, Mr. Rooney, he's pointing at, we got to get people around Kenny Pickett and this offense to actually get them prepared, to handle things better, because we saw towards the end of the season, everybody on offense was feeling it. There was a lot more rhythm with Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan as your co-offensive coordinators. Now you want to get the offensive coordinator who's going to be the head of the game plan, who's going to be the guy that's able to set the room right and kind of get everyone on the same page. And if you get that, I think that's where they're confident that they can get Kenny Pickett to a place where he's making competitive throws, and he'll be a good game manager quarterback. Because, again, the way that Art Rooney described that situation, they're talking about game managers. You're not talking about a guy making ridiculous plays. It's read the defense, get the ball out, get it to the right spot, let your teammates do the work. That's all they're going to ask of Kenny Pickett next year, and I think that's perfectly fine. Now, here's the kicker to this. If Kenny Pickett doesn't work out next year, this tells me that they're going to move on very quickly, because like again, let's face it. This year, whether you think Kenny Pickett stinks, whether you think he's good and hasn't had a chance, Kenny Pickett was in the games that Kenny Pickett started and finished this past year. The Steelers were 7-2, and I know wins aren't on a quarterback stat and all that stuff, but you know what? He finds ways to win, and that clutch factor is something the Steelers value and should value. And I think the thing is they gotta find ways to make him more consistent in what he sees in those big moments. Because if they do that and they're able to replicate that more, Kenny Pickett's a much bigger problem for defenses that they have to solve. But as it stands right now, he hasn't been that quarterback that everyone's had to keep worrying about consistently. I think that's where Art Rooney's talking about, like, hey, this is a priority to fix this and fix this soon. So I think they're gonna do it. What that shows me is that whatever offensive coordinator they get, if it's, we talked about this yesterday on the Monday show, but there's a chance that they go get a person who's not a quarterback whisperer and more about the system, but there's a chance they can go get the quarterback whisperer who isn't about who is about the system. If you're not a quarterback whisperer, but a person who isn't a quarterback whisperer, for example, on the opposite side of things, let's say Gerard Johnson, quarterback whisperer. He's only been a quarterback's coach. Arthur Smith, not a quarterback's coach. He was a former tight ends coach, turned offensive coordinator, turned head coach. He's not necessarily a whisperer, but he's an experienced guy. And Rooney also said experience is a key. So that also kind of tells me that Arthur Smith is pretty high up in the Steelers list right now. Granted, I still think that they want to, make some moves there before they solidify everything. And I think for those who are falling impatient with the waiting game of seeing who the Steelers hired offensive coordinator, y'all remember how long the GM search was? It took a while. There were a lot of steps that they had to do. So, I stress patience in that situation there. But I think Art Rooney's saying the right thing here. Fix the quarterback situation, and fixing it doesn't have to mean completely supplanting Kenny Pickett. Fixing the quarterback situation could just simply be about getting a game plan, getting an organized offense that comes in every single day, knows what the objective is, and they're moving all at the same pace, and then everyone can kind of fire off on all cylinders. I think that's what that's what they're looking at here. And if they get their job right now is to find that guy wherever he is in the NFL that can be the offensive coordinator that makes everything a lot more, give it a lot more stability in the coming year. But I think that on top of that, they need to have a guy who's going to be able to help Kenny Pickett either figure it out and grow into it, or a guy that's going to be like, man, that guy's so good, and Kenny Pickett wasn't able to score out of his offense as much. Then we got problems, and I think that's when the Steelers need to make the decision on Kenny Pickett. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't try to get to other talent right now, but I do think they should give him next year in the new system a chance to grow, a chance to show what he has, what he brings to the table there as far as a quarterback. And again, if Jaden Daniels falls to you, go get him. Like, if you're getting opportunities at a quarterback in the draft that you think is truly special, you can't pass up on those kind of opportunities if you think it's something special. You just can't. Quarterback is the position where if you hit once, you're good for the next 10 to 15 years. And so if you think that you can get that guy, like if, let's say Jaden Daniels is sitting there at 20, that's gonna be a tough sell to turn that away, because the Steelers, in my opinion, they need to be prepared for in case things don't go too great for Kenny Pickett this year. They need to have a contingency plan in place. I'm not so sure that they do on the roster right now. I think that by spring, when the draft has happened and free agencies happen, we'll have a much better picture of that then. But right now, if quarterback's the priority, that means that Kenny Pickett, you got 1 year to figure it out, and we'll see how things move forward. We'll take your calls on the other side of the first break here of the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We got a lot of phone calls from you guys, so we'll be getting to as many of them as we can today. Don't worry, if you're not heard today, we will be your topic will be moved to future shows down the line here. Now, I think that's going to be a fun segment there. We'll do that after the break here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, I want to remind you that this show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Happy Super Bowl to all those who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 back in bonus bets by winning any $5 money line bet. That is $200. That's the most money that we've ever seen FanDuel do in one of these promos. And if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some big bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win the Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 back in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook of the NFL. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our discussion here, and I want to open up the mailbag. We knew these. I said we opened up the call-in line. Remember, you can always call in to this show to get your opinion heard. 412-223-6644 for the show. If you ever want to get your question on the show, please leave your name, where you're from, and keep your question under a minute, and we'll do our best to get you on the show. So we turn to the call-in lines to answer some of your questions that you guys piled up. We had a lot that piled up, so apologies ahead of time. If yours isn't heard, do not worry. It is being stored and will be brought up at some point on the show. But let's lead with a question from Javon of Youngstown, Ohio, who asked about Mason Rudolph and where he fits in. And Art Rooney addressed this, but here is Javon's question.
Hey, what's up, Chris? Javon from Youngstown, Ohio here. What is the likelihood that we go outside the team for a quarterback? Not counting Mason, even though he's a free agent, but what is the likelihood we bring in a free agent quarterback to start quarterback for us next year? I love the show, man. Keep it up, man. Thanks.
Thanks, Javon. So first of all, on the free agent part of this, I think the Steelers do bring in somebody, even if they bring back Mason Rudolph, because they need to bring in competition. I think for everybody, even Mason Rudolph shouldn't feel safe. Kenny Pickett shouldn't feel safe. Everyone should be coming in with the idea that they have a chance to win a starting job and actually see that happen. And it might be the draft that they go and get that guy at quarterback. I think that my opinion, this ain't, if you're committing to Kenny Pickett getting a chance this year and maybe keeping Mason Rudolph and bringing in another quarterback in that room, maybe make this entire offseason, this entire free agency and the NFL draft about fixing everything else on the team so that next year, like let's say going in after 2024, you're going into the 2025 NFL draft. You've solidified your offensive line. You've solidified your secondary. You have figured out who your big playmakers are that you're going to pay long-term. You've maybe gotten some more help on the defensive line. You've done those things. And so now you feel like your roster is so balanced that you can go and trade up for the quarterback that you really want in the draft. That might be the move right there. But to answer Javon's question, I do think that they're going to do something there. But I also think they're going to try to keep Mason. And I thought it was interesting when Art Rooney actually talked about Mason, because someone asked him about his capabilities, and he said, in quote, "In terms of Mason, let's say I don't know that we've seen his ceiling yet. We've drafted him high for a reason, and it felt like he had a lot of ability, and I think we saw that. He's probably going to have some options, so it's going to be a question of whether he wants to come back and whether he can make a deal to get him back." Or we can make a deal to get him back. That's the question I have, is that with Mason Rudolph's success, I think someone does try to pay him actually now, not like a big bag or anything like that. But with Mason Rudolph at the end of the season, those 3 wins and some of the guts that he showed in the playoff game, someone's going to want to pay for that. And the Steelers have to do what they can to minimize that impact, because I think they like I said, they still are trying to build their team around, to build their team so that once they get the quarterback, they insert it, and it's just as long as you manage the game well, Steelers will have a good chance to win the game regardless of their opponent. So I do think that, to answer Javon's question, I do think they go and get somebody. I don't know if it's going to be anyone specific right now, but we will keep an eye on that as we move forward. But one person that everyone keeps bringing up, including 2 callers who called in about this question, is a player they could trade for out of Chicago. And of course, that's Justin Fields. Shout out to Luke. He asked this question as well, but Gary was the first person to ask this question. So I gave the question to him. Gary from North Carolina.
Hey, Chris, this is Gary from North Carolina. I have a question about the quarterback search. Going after like Justin Fields or trading for him, and if we can't get him from the Bears, I feel like we're only a quarterback away from making a really strong push for the Super Bowl. Maybe, how do you feel about maybe if we can't get him, about trading a bunch of draft picks to move up to get a guy like Drake May, Caleb Williams, or even Jalen Daniels? Appreciate you listening to my question.
Thank you, Gary. As always, you can call 412-223-6644 to get your question heard on this show. Let's address a few things here. One, to get Fields, they would need the Bears to want to give away Fields, and they would need to give them, I think, if the Steelers are being smart here, they're not overpaying for Justin Fields. I think you try to make it like a 4th round pick and like a fourth round pick this year, a 4th round pick next year, a 3rd round pick. Did something in there. But I think, in my opinion, when I look at the Steelers situation, you don't want to ask too much for Justin Fields because you need every pick right now to kind of rebolster this roster. So for me, I wouldn't do it because that if they're trading for him, that means they're probably they're probably getting pretty aggressive there. And I think that if you do that, like for example, if you don't get him, if you go trade up and get into the top 10 of the draft this year to get the quarterback, you need a new center right now. You need a new offensive tackle. You need another cornerback. There's a lot of different things that are first round definite needs right now for this team. And I think that's where it comes down to, is that if the Steelers are going to make moves, it's going to take further investing into those into the rest of the team. But trading for Justin Fields, trading away a lot of picks, just that I don't think that's the answer right now. Now, if they get it right, if the offensive line develops, if the run game becomes much more consistent, if things are trending that way, totally understand it. But right now, they just need to get on the train tracks. That's what needs to happen right now with this Steelers offense. They don't need to get aggressive by going and getting Justin Fields. They need to grow naturally. And I think that's what they're trying to work on. But let's get to our next question. This one comes from Latham all the way in Richmond, Virginia, asking about the offensive coordinator search, which we've talked about a lot. But here's Latham.
Hi, Chris. My name is Latham. I'm calling from Richmond, Virginia. To keep it kind of short and sweet, my question is, looking at this offensive coordinator search we got going on, now that it's been a couple weeks, there's definitely some names that have been floated, some people that have been interviewed. The people that they've looked at, the people that they've interviewed, what does that tell you that they're really looking for from a schematic standpoint? I know what Tomlin said in his press conference, and that doesn't maybe fully match some of these candidates that they're looking at. So what do you think they're looking at from a schematic standpoint, from a personality standpoint, and just an overall fit with the team? Enjoy the show. Thanks, man. Bye.
So first of all, thank you. Appreciate Latham and all of our callers that we brought on the show today. I think what it tells me is that the Steelers are still figuring out what kind of OC they want. They're trying to figure out who they can talk to get the right fit for what they're doing right now. And I think part of it is what I talked about on the Monday show. I think there's going to be guys like Arthur Smith who maybe they're not a quarterback coach, maybe they're not a head coach, maybe they're just a good offensive coordinator who can draw up plays and get guys open, and maybe that's what they need to do there. But I think that Arthur Smith could be that guy, maybe. But I still think they need to talk to Clint Kubiak. I still think that they need to see if there's a possibility that they'll be able to talk to Eric Bieniemy. Because he is under contract with the Commanders. But Gerard Johnson, Thomas Brown, all those guys, if I had to pick one right now, I think it's Arthur Smith of the candidates that are still available, because he had 2 years of top 10 offenses with the Titans. And I think that he could bring some good things to the Steelers as far as offensive play calling systems and things like that. Never wanted to be head coach again, but I think that would be a fine addition there as far as getting a guy like that. But I think the ultimate thing is they want a guy who's like Rooney said, it's going to, one, help Kenny Pickett, but also two, make the system easier on Kenny Pickett so the Steelers aren't having to just win off of quarterback play. We'll talk more about that as the weeks go on here. We'll have a lot of time to discuss it. Also, the Senior Bowl is coming up, so we'll talk that at some point on the show later this week. But that we got to get to what we've been doing, resuming our final grade segment. We'll get to the final grade, stars and skulls, totals counted up throughout the season. See what your Steelers safeties got graded as this year. We'll address that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast right after this. But first, I want to remind you that this show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy. And it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks to exhaust kits to LED lights and more, whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die life, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your parts are guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And eBay's guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter breaking things down on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's step away from what Rooney said. Let's get back into what we were doing last week when we had time. We'll try to get Alan Saunders back on again, hopefully Wednesday. He's driving down to Alabama. I would have had to record the show with him in the car while he was driving in the dark, and that just wouldn't be a good thing. So we'll bring Alan back on for that. But let's get to some of these grades here with the safety position. We're starting with the safety position simply because I think that it's a very peculiar situation of how they're going to be able to keep building. So let's start with guys that they kind of didn't get as many chances. I'm going to go with Elijah Riley to start. He really only played just a very tiny bit. Had a 1 star though, so he gets a C for that. No skulls, no bus tickets. He's fine. He barely played. Whatever, that's a thing there. But I think that everyone's looking at the other practice squatters the Steelers brought on with their safeties. You go back and you look at how they have found resilience throughout this year with the injuries of Minkah Fitzpatrick, the injury to Keanu Neal, what happened to Damontae KZ with his suspension. Those are all big factors, and they found answers there. And so we'll start with the grades. Remember, we did stars and skulls all season long. First, Trenton Thompson, who was coming in before all the injuries happened. All the injuries, he came in to help once Keanu Neal was hurt. He had 3 stars with 7 skulls. Wasn't particularly great, but look, that's good enough for a C- in the way that I grade things here at the stars and skulls counts. That's fine for a practice squad replacement player. Like that's fine. He's not spectacular, but he's doing his job, and I think you can totally live with that. But the other guy that everyone wants to talk about is Eric Rowe. Now, he only played a few games, so I couldn't really give him like a whole bunch of stars for those few games, but he got 3 stars and no skulls and no bus tickets. So that's good enough for a C+ in the safety room. And he is someone the Steelers, I think, should try to keep next year to see what he can bring to the table, bring him into training camp, and see how he does with the day-to-day going from there. But now let's get to some of the bigger names here, and we're going to start with Keanu Neal. Keanu Neal, I thought wasn't terrible, but wasn't notable enough, and then because of that, he had 4 stars, but he also had 7 skulls. He did have some bad games, and that no bus tickets, but that's good enough for a C- there. For Keanu Neal in the safeties. Now, time for the top 2 guys. We'll go to Damontae KZ. KZ had a very interesting year because there were some games that he was right on point and other games that he was not. And on the season, he had 7 stars, 9 skulls, no bus tickets. That's good enough for a C grade. But Damontae KZ, I think he's done a decent job since the Steelers have brought him in. I think that's going to be another question. They want to keep him in the mix there. I think that he brings value, but I also think that you want a guy that can free up Minkah Fitzpatrick from doing kind of the extra linebacker roles from doing the things that are more closer to the line of scrimmage. You want a safety who could take away those roles away and allow Minkah Fitzpatrick to go back being the X factor roaming safety there. And Damontae KZ, he loves to hit, he loves to lower his shoulder, but we've also seen him, one get suspended for these things and not be able to do that too well. So I look at Damontae KZ and I think that he's done a decent job. Obviously not the same as other guys, but that's what's going to be really interesting here. I'm going to show you this, and I think some people are going to be like, "What are you talking about, Chris?" But my Minkah Fitzpatrick grade was actually a C+ on the season, and C+ because he was able to get 7 stars and only 3 skulls with no bus tickets. So that's that's kind of reality. But here's the thing: a C+ is fine for a backup player. A C+ is fine for smaller teams or smaller players, in smaller positions, not smaller in size. You know what I mean? The backups, the guys that are coming from the practice squad. But it's not good enough for Minkah Fitzpatrick. And this was one of his worst seasons I think we've seen. Maybe it was straight up his worst season. But I think Minkah Fitzpatrick is focusing. I think he realizes he has to get back to what made him a multi-all-pro type of safety. I think it's going to be interesting to see what he does there. But bottom line is the safety room wasn't too impressive, in my opinion. This year, Minkah Fitzpatrick was definitely talented, but the group didn't yield enough really good results. There were times that they were on their stuff, especially late in games when they need to protect leads. But I think the Steelers team could use some help at safety next to Minkah Fitzpatrick, and that could be the thing that helps the Steelers secondary also be more complete. We've gone over a lot of different things here. We just finished the grades for the safety position for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We are going to see we're going to see how that continues to play out. We're going to see what as far as the Steelers want to take steps forward in with their safety group, but also we'll answer a lot more of your questions as the week rolls on. I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Watch us on YouTube. Subscribe to this YouTube channel for all your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. Back tomorrow with more on your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.